Hello, Mark Wornell.
Good morning, everybody.
I was saying that we hear your voice on the video.
I know.
And then we will see you.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
So
it's a 2-for-1.
Yes,
2-for-1 offer.
yes. Yeah. Mark Wornell is head of pedagogy at YesnYou, and will speak about multicultural and diverse teams. That's correct, Mark?
That's correct,
Yes.
yes. All in 10 minutes.
So are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. It's
Yes.
going to be very fast, okay?
Okay. And fun too. So I came again in the end your presentation to
Perfect.
see if anyone want to make you some questions. Okay?
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
see you.
Thank you very much. Well, we have the small topic of multicultural teams and diverse teams. Now, it's a massive subject. So we're just going to touch on my speciality, which is communication skills and thinking about how we get multicultural teams collaborating, integrating, and feeling included. But a quick question before we start. How many people here, hands up, who works with people from other nationalities or cultures? Pretty good. I'd say that's about 80%. 80% of people work with people from other countries. This is a huge challenge now. Digital transformation is changing our workplace like never before. We're in the middle of a digital revolution. And it's also a multicultural revolution. Multicultural teams are becoming the absolute norm. That people work with multiple different nationalities. You know, I work for a French company, and we have to work with many different nationalities. And I think on top of all the challenges, if you're working in human resources, you have to be thinking about how much budget you have to spend, because they never spend enough money on language training or cultural training. You have to think about how you're building the right type of culture so that you can engage your colleagues and your team members in your company's projects. You know, we're building cultures, and we know how important that is. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's what they say, isn't it? If you get the right culture, people will engage and feel integrated with your business and your aims and objectives. And these days, also with younger teams, younger demographics, we're looking at talent recruitment. How do we get people coming to work for our organization? Multicultural working is so popular. It's a romantic notion that we all have. We all dream about working with people from other countries and other cultures, and I think it's a massive advantage when you're looking into the workplace, looking at recruiting new people for your business. I think it's a huge opportunity to get things right for your company. But we have to consider many different things. So multicultural working means that we have a multilingual environment. So what is the reality of multilingualism? The truth is, it's not binary. Language communication is not in English or in Portuguese or in Spanish or in French. It's probably going to be a big mixture of all of those items, and sometimes at the same time. And that's the truth. And you have to feel comfortable with this. People will always want to communicate in their own language. Now, we have the lingua franca of English, and we insist on people speaking English internally, But how many meetings do you go to where people are using a bit of Portuguese, a bit of English, a bit of Spanish, you know, a bit of everything? Because it's all about communication and making yourselves understood. So code switching, which is switching between languages, and code mixing, which is where we start to mix individual words and phrases, it's completely normal and completely healthy in a multilingual company. And we would expect to be seeing this happening. Now, when I'm speaking with my French colleagues, my French is terrible, but I make an effort. And you can start to see how using somebody's own language makes such a difference to the outcome, to the communication. We were asked to give an audit for the French government, and everybody told me, they're terrible, they're mean, they're really strict, they're really tough. And they sent the person with the worst French into the audit for 2 hours with this auditor. But you know what? The auditor was like everybody else. He just wanted to communicate. He appreciated the effort. He'd never had a person who didn't speak French working with him. And the results were great because we started talking about his family, his dogs, and what he'd like to do at the weekend. So the reality of multilingualism is that it exists on many different levels. We have code switching, code mixing. That is all absolutely fine and healthy in a multicultural environment. So here's one of the questions we always have to think about. 80% of communication is with non-native speakers of English. So sometimes we have this unrealistic notion of what speaking English means. The majority of communication that is going on in your business is happening between people that are not native speakers from any country. So you've got German people talking to Swedish people, talking to Dutch people, talking to French people, and it's all going on in English. And this is really important to bear in mind because I think sometimes we have these measurements about how well are my team communicating in English, and I think the temptation is to measure them against native English speakers, and that is probably a mistake. Because communication is about making yourselves understood in the best way possible, and we have now to look at how people progress in English. English has become this lingua franca historically, trade, entertainment, media, lots of different reasons why English is the lingua franca. But why has it remained the lingua franca when we have Chinese and these other global languages coming into the workplace? Because it's really easy to learn at the beginning. That's why English is so popular. It's really, really probably one of the most simple languages in the world. Up to a certain point. So it's really easy and simple and quick to make progress in English, and then we hit the intermediate level, the intermediate plateau, and we start to be introduced to idiomatic expressions, phrasal verbs, and it suddenly becomes all about learning language in context, and that makes it really difficult. So English, really simple, and then suddenly really difficult. And most of your people will probably be in this intermediate fight to get better at their level, and that's absolutely normal. But the question often is, but what sort of English do we need to be learning? And, one of the ways of thinking about English is it's a standardized English that really we're interested in. Global English, Globish, Jean-Paul Nourier. He created this subset of English, and it's a tool where you can simplify English into 1,500 words. And realistically, that's where we need to be focusing our efforts on how do we communicate in a standard way between multiple different nationalities. Forget about native speakers. A native speaker will say, it's bucketing down and I'm over the moon. What does that mean? It's bucketing down and I'm over the moon. It means it's raining and I'm happy. Okay? And this is where I think language, multicultural language is going. Standardized, international English, which is simpler to understand. I think the lesson here is that probably a lot of native speakers should be receiving sensitivity training about dealing with non-native colleagues and learning to modify their language. You've had that situation where you're speaking in English to someone and then two native speakers start speaking and you think, what's this? This is a completely different language. And that's fine. Let it be a different language. What we're interested in is the more standardized version of English, because that makes our jobs in companies a lot more straightforward. When we're thinking about what types of training, all of the data that we have from our business, from our clients, from our learners, is saying, do we want short-term or long-term goals? People want short-term goals. People want short-term targets. Mobile phones are changing the way we view our own personal development. So we want shorter experiences, learning experiences. Do we want individual or group? One size fits all. No, I don't want that. I want something that's I want, I need. And learners are becoming much more selfish, but in a good way. They know what they want and what they need for their work. And I think for companies as well, it's about identifying more specific individual competencies and needs that learners have in their jobs. Personal or general, exactly the same. Do I just want to learn English? Which is this, from a learning perspective, and people with a tight budget, learn English. It sounds like a black hole for my money, So how do we make it more specific? By making it more personalized, making it more practical, and focusing on competencies, not knowledge. The CFR shift has moved away from certifications and knowledge. It's not about what you know. It's about how you use the language. And this is a really interesting development and very good for us language learners. It means that learners can now have a very practical, individualized, and personalized experience. They can find courses that are short, they're easily manageable, and you achieve more in a short period of time. So it's more efficient. I'm learning English. I want to have a course to have meetings with my customers in Turkey and Germany. I want to negotiate with my boss about my pay rise, because I speak so many languages. I want to speak and present to my team in English in the best way possible. So we start to say it's not learning English, it's learning specific competencies that we can measure, that we can track, and we can see progress in a very short period of time. This is much more interesting for companies. It's a more efficient use of their budget and a more efficient use of learner and company time. But of course, once we've learnt the language, it's not enough just to say, I understand what they're saying, but what do they mean? And meaning is all about culture. We see culture and we can see visible signs of culture. We can see the language, we can hear the language, we can see non-verbal signals and behavior. But what does it mean? That's what we can see, but we have to start to understand why English people see a queue of people and want to join it, you know, and they want to go and stand in a queue, whereas Spanish people, for example, will just form a nice big group near the event. And, you know, different ways of viewing, different values, different systems, different ways of acting and behaving. But it comes from all of these different cultural values that we can't see. This also happens to be the same with verbal communication. Low context, high context. Is it enough to say what we mean? So, US, Northern Europe, I say what I mean. It's direct communication. There is no context required. What I say is what I mean. And then as we push across the matrix, we start to incorporate more context. You know, are we saying what we want to say? Are you understanding what I'm saying to you? Good example of this. When I first went to Spain, I've lived in Spain for about 25 years, and the biggest cultural shock was in meetings. Because being an English person, I'm very used to turn-taking, like listening for signals, looking at people, non-verbal signs, and understanding when it's my turn to speak. In Spain, this didn't happen. Let's just say that conversation was much more fluid, and everybody was talking and repeating the same things, and I found it all very confusing for a long period of time. Until I started to culturally become aware of what was happening in those situations, that communication is more flexible and fluid, but there is more context in a Spanish meeting than in a UK meeting. And then I found myself adopting similar behavior. But when I went back to my UK meetings and my Northern European meetings, people said, Mark's a bit rude, isn't he? He always interrupts. He doesn't listen. He just interrupts. He's a bit chaotic. You know, so I was code switching in my behavior. And I was actually taking new learned behavior back into a different cultural environment. So culture, lots to think about, lots to confront. There's lots of great cultural tools out there and cultural trainers who talk, especially I think if you're working with, or you've got teams that are working with very specific cultural populations, so that you can get courses on working in a particular nationality or a particular environment. And then there are sort of generally more general topics available as well. For me, managing a multicultural team, this is by far the most important thing I do as a manager working with my teams. The water cooler. But in my case, the virtual water cooler. Everyone talks about it, but nobody does it. But it's so important to have a meeting, and it's enforced because that works, where people have a moment where they can come together and talk about their stuff. Anything. Their families, their holidays, work, mostly work, but anything else they want to talk about. Because it's these moments when multiculturally you create the bond, the trust, the communication, the collaboration that's necessary so that your business culture can start engaging and motivating these people. And my team I would describe as quite high performing because there is that trust, there is that engagement within the team because they feel as though they have their moments. So finally, you already know this, but the benefits of multicultural and diverse teams are huge if you get it right. Multicultural teams bring a whole different perspective, and it's all about perspectives and different lenses and focuses on situations. So improving problem solving, creativity, improving decision making. You know, I could throw different statistics and data at you, but everything points towards you start to improve all of these items in multicultural and diverse teams. And I know that you're going to go back out there and make sure that your multicultural team delivers for you. I think that's my time. But thank you all for listening. And if there are any questions, I will take them. Thank you. Thank you.
Alguém quer colocar uma questão ao Mark? O Mark também vai estar connosco durante o dia de hoje e de amanhã. Encontram-no na área de exposição no stand YesnYou, portanto vai estar durante o dia de hoje e o dia de amanhã. Qualquer questão podem passar lá e falar com ele. Yes, we have a question here, please.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much. My question is related to training multiculturality or cultural intelligence with teams. I always have this ambiguous perspective that we can teach people about the differences between cultures, like you just mentioned here in your presentation, but that might make people create more stereotypes with people saying, "Oh, okay, all Spanish people interrupt," or other type of stereotypes. So,
Absolutely.
where is the balance between giving people cultural intelligence, but at the same time making them understand that we're not all equal, even if we're all Portuguese and we get late to meetings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think ultimately it's about step one, and step one is language. I think it's about giving people the skills that they can level up. They will find time. People are not dumb. People will find time to understand, find out more about their co-workers and time. Hence the virtual water cooler. It's so important to have that time to figure out who your colleagues are. And I think then there is a second step, which would be specific cultural support, which I think can help you with certain, whether it's certain colleagues or populations or people that you're working with. But I think ultimately it's about people and people connecting, you know? Yeah.
So, Mark, I was saying that you are with us today and tomorrow.
Yes.
And they can find you on YesnYou stand.
Absolutely.
They can talk with
It'd be lovely to carry on the conversation.
Yes. Okay, no more questions? No. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So I